Hey guys, tonight we're opening two very different doors in the medieval world. One swings open to the clanging life of a castle's training yard. The other creaks into the stone-cold silence of a monastery cloister. On one side, you've got a knight tightening his belt for yet another morning of bruises and boasts. On the other, a monk slides into a stiff robe and shuffles toward another day of chanting, fasting, and squinting at Latin texts he may or may not fully understand. You'll be stuck in this era, so yeah, you probably won't survive this. Between the fleas, the fasting, and the 50 pounds of gear or guilt you'll carry every day, you'll start wondering if you should have just been a medieval chicken. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling generous, drop your location and local time in the comments. I like knowing who's out there sleepwalking through history with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the middle of a stone courtyard. You feel the chill already, and it's not even dawn yet. You look down, either at your mud-caked leather boots or your bare feet wrapped in itchy cloth strips. That's the first difference. If you're a knight in training, you're surrounded by the metallic scent of armor polish and damp wool. If you're a monk, it's beeswax, parchment, and something that might be mold. Either way, you woke up on a straw mattress. Or let's be honest, something trying its best to impersonate one. Lumpy, flat, and full of mystery. And you probably shared it with something living. The difference is, the knight grunted and rolled off his mattress in a shared hall smelling like sweat and ale, while the monk crept silently from his cell, where silence is so strict you don't even get to say ow when you stub your toe on a stone bench. The knight squints at the courtyard, scanning the guards, stable boys, maybe the squire tripping over a saddle. His day will be movement, metal, and mud. The monk? He's already turning inward. Not metaphorically, literally turning into the monastery's dim corridor, hands clasped, sandals slapping gently on cold stone. Historians still argue whether most monks actually enjoyed this seclusion, or whether they just didn't have the social skills for normal medieval life. Either way, here you are. The bell rings. It's your wake-up call, and it has no snooze button. For the monk, that's the matins bell. It's time for early morning prayers, the first of many throughout the day. You shuffle to the chapel like you're being summoned to judgment, because in some ways, you are. For the knight, the bell is usually someone yelling, possibly an older knight throwing a wooden practice sword at your head because you overslept. Again. In both cases, your first thought is, do I have to? And in both cases, yes, you absolutely do. Because whether it's God or your overlord watching, someone's always keeping score. Outside, the castle's waking up. Blacksmiths hammer at cold anvils, stable hands shovel. Well, stable things. If you're lucky, you're not on dung duty today. If you're unlucky, well, enjoy your pitchfork. Inside the monastery, the silence is almost eerie. Everything moves in rhythm, like a slow, quiet dance. You file into the chapel with your fellow monks, trying not to cough, sneeze, or look like you just woke up from a dream about cheese wheels and freedom. It's all very serious, but also a little funny, because no one actually knows what time it is. Medieval timekeeping? A joke. It's still pitch black outside and everyone is just pretending it's sunrise. Fringe fact. Some monasteries kept time with candle clocks. Basically, They'd burn a candle marked with lines and say, "When it melts to here, it's time for prayer." Yes, your spiritual rhythm was one waxy mishap away from chaos. Meanwhile, the knight is already half-dressed, not fully armored yet. You don't suit up like that just to pee. But maybe a padded gambeson, leather boots, a thick wool tunic. You'll get to chainmail later. For now, it's all about limbering up and looking like you didn't spend the night dreaming about bread. The squire brings your gear, and you immediately start regretting every decision that led you here. Because putting on armor isn't just getting dressed. It's a medieval workout. It creaks, it smells, and it pinches you in places that we can't mention in this PG-13 narration. The knight grimaces. You, in knight form, just grunt and tighten your belt. Now compare that to Monk you, who's been standing in one place reciting psalms for what feels like 6 years. Your knees hurt, your stomach's growling, and your feet are cold. Always cold. But at least no one's trying to hit you with a wooden stick before breakfast. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some monasteries had rules against bathing too often, because apparently, being clean could lead to vanity. So yes, your spiritual purity may come at the cost of smelling like damp wool and regret. The knight, on the other hand, gets dirtier by the minute. He doesn't worry about vanity. He worries about chafing, and whether or not today is the day the Lord decides to test out a new warhorse on him. Spoiler: it bites. Still, whether you're cloistered or clanking, one thing's the same. You're in a system, and the system does not care if you slept poorly or if your left ankle still hurts from last week's accidental training mishap. You get up, you do your duty. You pretend you didn't hear someone whisper "idiot" behind you during the Psalms, or drop a sword mid-spin in the yard. And this is just the beginning. Because medieval life, my dear sleeper, does not care about your bedtime routine or skincare regimen. It cares about structure, submission, and surviving long. Enough to complain about it to your grandkids, if you make it that far. You're barely an hour into your day, and already your back hurts. For different reasons depending on the robe or armor you're stuck with. The knight side of you is stretching out sore muscles from yesterday's grappling, drills, and wondering whether breakfast will be dry bread or slightly less dry bread. The monk side of you has just shuffled out of the chapel, where your breath hung visibly in the air while you whispered prayers your stomach didn't understand, because it was too busy begging for porridge. Here comes your first real stop, the morning meal. And yes, we're using meal generously. For the monk, it's a silent procession to the refectory, which sounds fancy until you realize it's basically a long, cold dining hall, with no laughing, no talking, and no second helpings. You sit on a hard bench. You lower your eyes. You chew slowly because the food's not exciting, and also because it's polite. A lector reads scripture while you eat, which means that even your chewing is being judged by someone quoting the book of Psalms. Honestly, you're a little impressed you haven't just walked into the forest to live among squirrels. And the meal itself? It depends on the day. Most monks follow a diet that's meatless at least a few days a week. So today might be a lentil, mush, coarse black bread, maybe a turnip stew if it's your lucky Tuesday. Flavor is not the goal here. Humility is. Historians still argue whether monks were always so strict, or whether they sneaked some forbidden bacon into the back kitchen when the abbot wasn't watching. Meanwhile, Night you is somewhere between annoyed and ravenous. You probably had to wait your turn while the lord of the castle and his family ate first. You sit lower on the hierarchy, so your breakfast might be cold scraps by the time you get to them. Wheat porridge if there's any left, or hard cheese with a hunk of bread. And let's not forget the thin ale. Yes, ale. Because the water might kill you faster than your next training injury. Quirky detail. In some households, they use stale bread as plates, called trenchers. You eat your food off it, and when you're done, you either eat the trencher too, or give it to the dogs. So yeah, you eat your plate. Biodegradable dinnerware, medieval style, with food. The knight heads outside again. Training resumes. You're in the yard with wooden weapons first. Maybe a sword, maybe a polearm that weighs as much as a sheep and swings like a nightmare. You square off against another young knight or squire. It's all grunting and footwork and someone yelling, "Keep your guard up," every 3 seconds. There's a chance you'll be knocked flat on your back today, or hit hard enough to see stars, even in daylight. But this is what you signed up for. You're learning to defend your liege, your land, and your ego. Monk you, though, has a very different schedule. After breakfast, it's work time too, but of a quieter kind. You're assigned a duty based on your monastery's needs. Could be gardening, mending robes, or helping copy manuscripts in the scriptorium. Yes, that means squinting at Latin words you can barely read and trying not to spill ink on the page that took Brother Peter 3 weeks to finish. This is slow, repetitive work. Peaceful? Sometimes. Maddening? Also sometimes. There's a rhythm to it, though. You start feeling the hours stretch out like warm wax. The scratching of quills, the clinking of tools, the occasional creak of wooden doors. No one talks unless necessary. Even sneezing is kind of a scandal. Back outside, Night U is now sweating, or shivering, or both. Because weather doesn't care about your training schedule. You're drilling on foot today, practicing charges, shield formations, and the art of yelling convincingly while swinging a sword. And remember, this isn't glamorous. There's no dramatic music or slow motion. There's just bruises, bad smells, and the faint hope your lord noticed that cool move you pulled during the last round. Some knights in training also ride, and if you're one of them, congratulations. You're about to get thrown off a horse again. Horses are majestic, yes, but they're also gigantic bundles of chaos that sometimes dislike armor-clad humans climbing onto them. And historians still argue whether all knights actually train daily with horses, or if that was more of a noble luxury limited to those with money to spare on oats and broken ribs. Monk U is now tending the herb garden, or maybe hauling water. You pass Brother Thomas, who hasn't smiled in 6 years, and nod politely. The sun is rising higher. Your robe is itchy, but you settle into the task. The silence isn't punishment. It's part of the design. The rhythm of your work is a form of prayer. It's weirdly calming. Until you remember you still have 6 more prayer sessions today. One fun little tidbit: some monks were in charge of beekeeping. That's right, peaceful, honey-loving monks battling swarms for that sweet medieval nectar. So while Knight U is dodging sword swings, Monk, you might be ducking bees. Choose your fighter wisely. Now here's something both Knight and Monk share: the looming pressure of hierarchy. You've got a boss either way. For the Knight, it's the Lord, maybe even a Baron or Earl, watching from a tower window or barking orders during drills. For the Monk, it's the Abbot, a man who radiates silent disapproval and has probably memorized every rule in the Regula Benedicti, rule of Saint Benedict. Whether it's swing higher or pray harder, someone is always reminding you the perfection is expected and failure is, well, let's just say there are punishments. Knight, You might get extra night drills or be made to clean the stables with a spoon. Monk, you might fast for a day or be sent to the silence bench, which is exactly what it sounds like, and you haven't even reached midday. So let's recap where you are. If you're a knight, you're probably bruised, hungry again, and wondering how anyone actually survives battle if sparring is this painful. If you're a monk, you're about to return to the chapel for the next round of prayers, probably called terce, and your knees are already sore from kneeling. But oddly enough, you're starting to see the patterns. The day's built like a loop. Wake, eat, work, pray, or train, eat, train more, and hope someone else gets picked to run laps in full chainmail. Whether you're bound by silence or by steel, your life has a shape. It's rigid, sure. It's uncomfortable often. But it's also reliable. And in a world where plague, famine, and angry nobles could show up without warning, predictability is kind of a blessing, even if your boots still leak. Midday creeps in not with a grand fanfare, but with a dull ache in your shoulders. Whether it's from swinging a sword too many times or lugging buckets of water across uneven stone paths. The sun is higher now, baking the castle courtyard or gently warming the monastery walls. Either way, you're thinking about lunch like it's the first kind thought you've had in hours. Night. You wipes the sweat from your brow and heads toward the hall again. The smell of cooked meat, if today's one of those days, wafts through, the air like a whispered promise. Your boots echo on the stone floor as you enter the great hall, where long wooden tables stretch under low-beamed ceilings, and the air feels damp no matter the season. Lunch for a knight in training isn't extravagant unless you're the noble heir yourself. Maybe there's a broth, perhaps thick with barley or cabbage, with a side of coarse bread. A roasted bird if your lord is feeling generous. And yes, more ale. It's not about getting tipsy, it's about not getting dysentery. The water isn't exactly Evian, and boiling it for tea isn't really a thing yet. But don't get too comfortable. You eat fast. You eat what you're given. And you don't ask questions unless you want to end up cleaning chamber pots with your bare hands. There's a strict pecking order, and you, dear squire or junior knight, are very much at the pecked end of it. Meanwhile, Monk you is easing into sext. Not that kind, don't get excited. Sext is one of the scheduled prayer hours, often around noon, where monks return to the chapel to chant and kneel in rhythm. The ritual continues, chanting in Latin under flickering candlelight, or filtered sunlight if it's a clear day. Your stomach growls at an awkward volume, but no one acknowledges it. Silence is golden and enforced. Only after the prayers are complete do you file back into the refectory for lunch. Again, there's no chatter. There's more scripture reading. And the food? Slightly better than breakfast, but still humble. A soup, maybe. Root vegetables, some grains. If it's a feast day, which means a religious holiday, and there are hundreds, there might be fish or even some wine. Quirky fact of the day. Some monasteries had warming rooms, the only heated place in the building, usually used to keep old or sick monks from freezing. Historians still argue whether these rooms were also used to sneak in naps, despite vows of discipline. You wouldn't be surprised if they were. Monk, you dreams of sitting near that fireplace, even just for 5 minutes. By now, you're midway through your medieval day, and there's no such thing as downtime. Monk you heads off for manual labor again, maybe helping bind books, feed chickens, or repair sandals. The rhythm resumes. Each job is part of your devotion. Even sweeping dirt from the cloister floor is seen as holy work. And knight you? Oh, you're heading back into more training. This time, tactics. You and the others may set up mock battlefield scenarios in the courtyard or nearby fields. You learn how to follow orders, when to hold formation, and the art of pretending you know what you're doing when your visor fogs up and you can't see a thing. You might even get to practice with a lance, which sounds awesome until it knocks you off your saddle and into a patch of mud so foul it might be older than the castle itself. The sound of metal clashing, horses snorting, and barked instructions fill the air. You are, after all, training for a job that has a 50-50 chance of ending in a battlefield grave. But hey, no pressure. Here's the odd twist. Both paths, knight and monk, are obsessed with discipline. Not the modern self-help kind, but the grinding, repetitive, all-consuming kind. Every part of your day is shaped by duty. To your order, your lord, your god, your rank. And both have their rewards. Knight. You might earn prestige, land, maybe even a castle one day. Monk. You might earn spiritual enlightenment, or at the very least a place in heaven where you're not constantly cold and tired. Mid-afternoon arrives, and both of you start feeling the weight of the day. For the knight, that means maintaining gear. You take off your armor, piece by piece, each one heavy enough to bruise your toes if dropped, and begin oiling it to prevent rust. You tend to your weapons, sharpen blades, and double-check your saddle. Because if you slack off and your sword breaks mid-battle, you're not getting a second chance. Some knights also spend this time in training games, mock duels or wrestling matches, all under the supervision of grizzled veterans who never. Monk you is headed back to the chapel for another round of prayer. None this time, typically around mid-afternoon. By now, you're used to the flow of chant and incense. Your knees protest every genuflection. You might lose your place in the psalter once or twice, but your voice joins the others in that ancient harmony, rising into the stillness of the air like a warm exhale. After prayer, you might assist in more copying, maybe illuminating manuscripts with delicate colors and gold. Leaf, which sounds glamorous until you realize how long it takes to finish even a single page. You're hunched over, concentrating hard, and then, oops, ink spill. A ruined sheet. Brother Marcus won't say anything, but you can feel the judgment radiating off his tonsured head like heat from a stove. Now let's throw in something deliciously weird. Did you know some monks believed burping after a meal was sinful? They saw it as a form of gluttony. Imagine carrying that guilt with you after eating a single turnip too fast. Medieval shame. Now in audio form. Knight. You doesn't care about burps. You care about your next tournament. Or at least the dream of one. Tournaments were big deals. They were how knights gained fame, practiced combat, and, let's be honest, showed off. Some had elaborate pageantry, parades, heraldic flags, and trumpets. Others were chaotic melees where you just tried not to get knocked unconscious. Historians still argue whether the early tournaments were more honor-based or just licensed chaos. But right now, that's a dream. Right now, you're cleaning your armor and wondering if the itchy rash on your neck is from sweat or fleas. You've got no mirror. Just an educated guess and a prayer. Both yous, knight and monk, are drifting toward evening now. Your body is tired, your mind slightly foggy, and you've memorized the creaks in the wooden floors and the scent of the air. Whether it's beeswax polish or damp hay, your world is raw and repetitive. But it's also deeply ordered, and something in that order, despite the bruises and boiled cabbage, keeps you going. Evening begins to stretch across the land like a well-worn blanket. Patchy, a little frayed at the edges, but comfortingly familiar. The light grows gold and sleepy, shadows lengthen, and you, whether monk or knight, feel the final push of the day pressing in. Let's start with you, the knight. You're sticky with sweat, your arms aching from drills, and your eyes stinging from dirt and sun. You're allowed to disarm now. Finally. Peeling off your armor feels like shedding a second skin, though that skin probably smells like old leather, rust, and onions. Again with the onions. You head to the bathhouse. If you're lucky. Most castles have a basic bathing setup. Wooden tubs, lukewarm water hauled in buckets, and not a whiff of lavender in sight. You wash off as best you can, hoping no one else decides to barge in with the idea of a prank. Nightly camaraderie can sometimes include things like hiding your breeches or putting frogs in your boots. Cleanish and slightly more human, you dry off and pull on a tunic for supper. There's a small sense of peace in this moment. Your hair still damp, the cold air raising goosebumps on your skin, and the low buzz of voices from the dining hall ahead. Meanwhile, Monk U is preparing for Vespers, the evening prayer hour. The bells toll, a deep, low rhythm that echoes through the stone corridors like a lullaby sung by giants. You slip into your robe, still smelling faintly of old parchment and incense, and shuffle into line with the others. The chapel glows with candlelight, the shadows on the stone walls flickering like ghostly dancers. You take your place, bow your head, and begin to chant. The rhythm of it is steady, grounding, and almost hypnotic. It's the kind of chant that makes your bones feel heavy in the best way. As the light fades outside the stained glass windows, your thoughts slow. There's no need to impress anyone here. No tournaments, no hierarchy, just breath and voice and silence. Tonight's supper will follow shortly. And yes, it's just as quiet as every other monk meal. Still no talking, just chewing and scripture. If you're in a more relaxed order, you might get a slice of cheese. If not, it's more root vegetables and dark bread. No Instagram photos, no seasoning. But the warm food sits nicely in your belly, and you're grateful. For both lives, there's a slowing down now. The bustling energy of morning and the grind of afternoon work give way to a quieter cadence. Knight U is sitting at the long wooden table again, surrounded by squires, pages, and maybe a few seasoned warriors nursing their sore backs. Tonight, there might be a bard singing a tale of dragons that never existed, or kings that might have. The fire crackles. You chew your meat, probably pork if the larder's been kind, and sip ale that's warmer than it should be. You laugh. You jostle your friend beside you. You're bruised, but alive. And now for a peculiar little tidbit. In some knightly circles, it was considered bad luck to polish your sword at night. Superstition said it could cut your dreams short, which is just vague enough to be creepy. Historians still argue whether this belief had roots in pagan rituals, or if it was just a good excuse to be lazy after sundown. Monk. You doesn't have to worry about cursed dreams, but you do worry about your candle running out during scripture. Reading. Wax is precious, and darkness comes fast. Some monasteries actually measured time by burning candles marked with lines. Each line was about 20 minutes, so when the last inch melts, that's your cue. Lights out. Before bed, monks might enjoy a brief moment in the cloister garden if the weather allows. Imagine the cool air brushing your face, the stars blinking above in perfect silence, the scent of herbs from the nearby apothecary plot rising up from the dirt. You walk slowly. You reflect. You've said 7 rounds of prayers today, and you'll do it all again tomorrow. But right now, there's peace. Night. You isn't wandering gardens. You're probably helping put away armor. Or if you're high-ranking, enough, maybe leaning back in a wooden chair while a younger squire does it for you. Either way, your muscles are tired. Your eyelids heavier by the minute. One last task before bed. Sharpening your sword. Yes, even if it's bad luck. You sit by the fire with a whetstone, dragging the blade across with slow, practiced movements. It's oddly soothing. Like combing through memories you don't want to forget. The metal sings under your hands. A whispering promise that tomorrow you'll be ready again. And here's the oddly hilarious part. Some knights believed sneezing during sword maintenance was an omen of battle. Sneeze once, small skirmish. Twice, a duel. 3 times, stay home tomorrow. Seriously. Scholars still debate whether this came from old Germanic beliefs or just medieval allergy season. By the time the stars are out and the fire burns low, you, both versions of you, are being called to rest. For Monk you, it's Compline, the final prayer of the day. The name comes from the Latin completorium, meaning completion. You chant once more in near darkness, the words spilling out like a soft tide. It's not about eloquence, it's about rhythm, about closure, about the humble act of finishing something well. Afterward, you shuffle to your dormitory, a shared space with rows of narrow beds or straw pallets. You remove your robe, fold it neatly and lie down. No pillows, maybe a blanket. You curl up, cold toes and all, and whisper one last prayer. The silence that follows is immense. Night. You returns to your quarters, more private, but no less drafty. The walls are thick, the floor cold. If you're lucky, there's fur on your bed. If not, it's just you and a lumpy mattress that smells faintly of mold. But it's yours. You stretch out, arms sore, legs stiff, and stare at the wooden beams above. A single candle flickers. You listen to the soft crackle of the fire, the occasional snore from the next room, and somewhere far off, the hoot of an owl. This world is harsh, strange, and entirely yours. Soon you'll sleep. You wake before the sun even considers yawning. The world is still a hushed blur of blues and grays, the air carrying that damp medieval chill that goes straight to your bones. Whether you're a knight or a monk, there's no sleeping in. Forget that modern concept of snooze buttons. Here, the bell is the boss. As a monk, that first bell is your call to matins, the first set of prayers, ringing out in the pitch-dark stillness. You shuffle out of bed like a half-animated wax figure, rubbing your eyes and wrapping yourself in your robe. The corridors are freezing. Stone under bare feet makes you flinch, but you make your way to the chapel with the others, and together you begin to chant. The rhythm is quiet, almost sleepy, as if everyone's still trying to mentally show up. This early service might go on for an hour, sometimes longer. In some monasteries, especially the really devout ones, matins was followed by lauds, meaning you basically got a double scoop of spiritual wake-up. Who needs coffee when you've got 2 hours of Latin liturgy before breakfast? Night you, on the other hand, might have a slightly more relaxed awakening, especially if there's no battle looming. Still, the sun doesn't wait. You're up, early, pulling on a tunic, grabbing some cold bread or maybe porridge if the cooks had mercy. No cinnamon, no berries, just the bland glue of survival. You stretch your back, still sore from yesterday's training. There's no such thing as a memory foam mattress in your century. Just straw, bugs, and a recurring crick in your neck. But you're used to it. You slap your cheeks a couple times, wake up, toughen up, and get ready to start the whole cycle again. Let's talk grooming. For monks, cleanliness is a spiritual thing. You might not have a mirror, but your tonsure, the classic shaved circle on the crown of your head, has to stay neat. Monasteries even had designated brothers for haircutting, which probably made for some entertainingly uneven results. Still, it was all about humility. No vanity, no showy hairdos. Night U has more variety. Depending on your status and culture, you might grow out your hair into long waves, or keep it short and practical. Beards? Very much in. Especially among those trying to look wise, rugged, or just hide a chin. Fun fact, some knights would apply animal fat or wax to style their beards. Historians still argue whether this was a fashion statement or a misguided attempt at medieval moose. By mid-morning, you've both hit your stride. Monk U heads back into study, manuscript work, or helping with daily chores like candle making or beekeeping. Yes, beekeeping. Some monasteries were famous for their honey and wax. You tend the hives with slow, gentle movements. No protective gear, of course. You whisper prayers and hope not to sneeze near a bee. And if you do, well, let's just say it'll make your next set of chants extra nasal. Night U is back in the training yard. Today might be a day for jousting practice, or maybe you're running drills on horseback. There's shouting, hooves pounding the dirt, and the metallic clatter of swords striking shields. You dodge, swing, parry. Your arm feels like it's being slowly unscrewed at the shoulder. You wonder if you'll ever lift it again. Spoiler, you will. Just barely. Let's not forget one of the most grueling nightly exercises, climbing the keep stairs in full armor. That's 60 pounds of steel and shame clanking up stone steps. You do this for endurance. You do it because Sir Robert can do it and he's at least 20 years older. You do it because your pride outweighs your thighs. Somewhere in this frenzy, you remember why you chose this life. Or maybe you didn't choose it. Maybe your father handed you a sword at age 7 and said, "Start swinging." That's how it went for many nobles. Monk, you likely didn't have much of a say either. You were sent to the monastery by your family. Too many sons, not enough inheritance. But now you're here. And the life you live has become the rhythm of your breath, monk. You slips into the library around midday, where the smell of parchment and dust creates a kind of quiet euphoria. You read slowly, eyes tracking Latin phrases you've copied over hundreds of times. Every word is sacred. Every mistake a smudge on your soul. But today's not so bad. You only smeared one line. Quirky detail? Some monks would write, "May God forgive this scribe," at the bottom of their pages when they were especially tired. Scholars still debate whether this was sincere or just medieval sarcasm. Around the same time, Night U is probably listening to a storyteller or herald recount news from afar. A battle in France. A new pope in Rome. Some cousin of yours might be marrying a duchess. Or was it a nun? You weren't really listening. You're distracted by the new sword someone just brought into the yard. It's sleek. It gleams. You want it. And here comes another fringe tidbit. There were actual laws about how shiny your armor could be in some regions. Too much polish was seen as vanity and could draw ridicule. So yes, even your glinting shoulder plates could be considered scandalous. Medieval problems. By early afternoon, the sun is high and your stomach is growling again. Monkey joins the community for another silent meal. There's lentils, barley, and once again, guess what? Onions. Always onions. Night you? If it's a feast day or you're in a generous mood, you might get roasted game, baked apples, or cheese. But most days, you're chewing through the same stew as yesterday, and possibly the day before. You don't ask what's in it. You just eat. Your day continues on, the hours drifting past like clouds, sometimes fast, sometimes dragging their feet. Monk. You hears the bell again. Another prayer hour, another chance to center your soul. Night you heads back out, perhaps, to the stable to check your horse. Maybe you talk to it like a best friend. Maybe you whisper secrets. After all, it listens better than your squire. And just like that, the afternoon begins to melt into evening again. Evening rolls in like a slow, familiar tide. The sky turns a sleepy amber, then deepens into a curtain of ink blue as stars begin to blink into view. For both the knight and the monk, this part of the day brings a shift. Not just in tasks, but in mood. You feel it in your chest. A kind of loosening. A soft exhale after hours spent bracing and performing. Monk you heads to the chapel once again. It's time for Vespers, the evening prayer. The air inside is warmer now. Candles flicker along the stone walls, casting long shadows that sway gently with every breath of wind. The chants flow more fluidly now, slower, deeper. You sing, not because you're forced to, but because your voice is part of this sacred rhythm. You're not thinking about supper or tomorrow's chores, just syllables, just light and sound and presence. Night. You, by contrast, has had just about enough of movement. Your arms are sore, your back creaks, and your stomach is rumbling like a hungry bear. You peel off your armor, piece by piece, greaves, gauntlets, breastplate, feeling 20 pounds lighter with every clang to the floor. There's always that one stubborn buckle that won't come loose. You curse under your breath, but not too loudly. Your squire's right there, pretending not to notice your struggle. Then it's time to gather for supper. If you're lucky, and it's a good day, maybe a holy feast or a victory celebration. There might be roast pig, fresh bread, mulled wine. Your fellow knights lounge around the long wooden table, shouting over each other, laughing about training mishaps and past battles. Someone probably retells the one about the knight who charged the wrong direction in a tournament. Again. You chuckle, even though you've heard it 20 times. Back in the monastery, Monk you finishes Compline, the final prayer of the day. The chanting now feels like a lullaby. You walk quietly down the cloister, the worn stones smooth underfoot. There's no raucous laughter, no clinking mugs, just the quiet shuffle of robes, the hush of shared purpose. In many ways, it's more peaceful. In other ways, it's a little lonely. But here's a twist. While monks are often remembered for solemnity and stillness, some monasteries were known for having secret gardens or hidden spots where brothers could sneak away for a laugh. Or, dare we say, a game of dice. Historians still argue whether such tales are exaggerated or unspoken truths from behind the cloister walls. And yes, there were rules against gambling. Many rules, which were often creatively interpreted. Now, bedtime for Monk U is strict. No flickering candlelight reading under the covers. No sneaking down for a snack. Lights out means lights out. You lie on your cot, wrapped in a thin blanket, listening to the wind nudge the walls of the abbey. Some nights, the owls call. Other nights, it's just silence. Thick and comfortable. Night U, however, has more flexibility. You might still be up, drinking by the fire or chatting with the steward about tomorrow's training. Or maybe you're staring into the flames, lost in thought. About war, about glory, or maybe just about how much your foot hurts. Eventually, though, even you have to crash. You flop onto a straw mattress, the scratchy blanket never quite covering both your shoulders and your toes at the same time. It smells faintly of damp earth and something less pleasant. Probably your armor's fault. But you're too tired to care. You close your eyes. Your hand rests on the hilt of your sword, just out of habit. It's worth noting here that despite popular belief, knights didn't always sleep in full armor. That's just uncomfortable fan fiction. But they might keep it nearby, especially if there was tension in the region or rumors of attack. Monk U dreams of golden crosses and illuminated texts. Night U dreams of horses, of thunderous gallops, and occasionally of tripping over a chicken in front of the entire court. It happens. Then, before you know it, dawn returns. The bell tolls again. Always that bell. You rise, groggy and achy, because it's time to do it all over again. But today's not just another day. There's a delivery. Someone arrives at the monastery gate with a wrapped parcel. Rare spices from Venice, maybe, or an illuminated manuscript from France. Everyone's curious. Monk U watches closely as the abbot inspects it, then carefully places it in the scriptorium. You're allowed to peek later, maybe even help copy it. The pages shimmer faintly with gold. You breathe in that rich, dusty scent of ink and old parchment. It's intoxicating. Back in the knight's quarters, news arrives. A noble wedding, a tournament, or more likely, a call to arms. A messenger on horseback, panting and dust-covered, announces that your lord requires every able-bodied knight by week's end, and just like that, your whole energy shifts. Training becomes sharper, focused. You ride harder, strike faster. You start inspecting your armor with new urgency. That dent in your chest plate suddenly matters. That horse you've been neglecting, brushed down and fed extra oats. Meanwhile, Monk U prepares spiritually. The abbot announces special prayers for peace. You kneel longer, sing louder. But there's tension in the air, a subtle weight. Even behind cloistered walls, you can feel the world's unrest leaking in like damp through stone. And then there's this odd intersection. Monks praying for peace while knights prepare for war. Both equally devout. Both convinced of their duty. Historians still argue whether the medieval church genuinely tried to curb violence, or simply blessed it when it served their interests. As evening falls again, there's a strange harmony. The chant from the chapel echoes faintly through the valley, while knights drill in the distance, swords glinting in the twilight. It's a world of contradictions, silence and steel, humility and pride, peace and preparation. And you? You straddle. Both. You're up before the sun again. The horizon is still yawning open when Monk Yu trudges toward the chapel, sandals tapping against the cold stone floor. This time, something feels different. Maybe it's the way the morning air bites just a little harder, or the way the light from the eastern window lands right on your cheek like a quiet reminder. You're still here. Another day has begun. Night. You is already awake too, but for entirely different reasons. There's a new mission. No longer the comfortable rhythm of drills and banter. Orders have arrived, scrawled on a piece of stiff parchment sealed with red wax. You break it open, read quickly, then read it again more slowly just to be sure. You're being summoned to a nearby lord's estate. Something about rising tensions in the borderlands. Something about keeping the peace. Or keeping power, depending on who's telling the story. But first, the horse. And there begins a very specific kind of medieval chaos. You head to the stables, stepping over a lazy cat and dodging a hen who clearly has beef with your boots. Your warhorse, a sturdy thing named Roland, or Buttercup, depending on your current mood, snorts as you approach. You spend the next half hour brushing, saddling, muttering under your breath as the reins tangle again. It's a process. An art form, really. And yes, horses had personalities, some worse than nobles. One knight once described his horse as a jealous wife, a needy child, and a stubborn mule wrapped into one fuzzy disaster. Meanwhile, back at the abbey, Monk Yu is deep in the herb garden. The sun's higher now, and you're gently crumbling. Time leaves between your fingers, gathering enough sage for the infirmary. A brother nearby sneezes from the pollen, and you glance over with a sleepy smile. It's a small task, but it matters. Healing, even in simple forms, is part of your sacred duty. Sometimes you prepare poultices. Sometimes it's just hot onion water for a cough. But every once in a while, a villager limps in with a serious wound or a troubling fever. You assist the infirmarian, tying linen, grinding dried roots into bitter paste. You don't talk much. Your hands do the speaking. Knight Yu, by contrast, is more about breaking things than mending them. Now, fully mounted, you trot out onto the open road, joined by a few fellow knights and squires. The journey's not dramatic, just trees, bird song, the clop of hooves on dirt, but it's quietly beautiful, until it starts raining. Not a mist, a downpour. Your tabard sticks to your chest, and someone behind you sneezes so violently they nearly fall off their horse. You keep riding. You arrive late afternoon, soaked and sore. The Lord greets you with forced politeness and cold wine. You're told you'll patrol the outer villages tomorrow. You nod, trying to focus while dripping onto his mosaic floor. Nobles love their floors. You think briefly about apologizing, but instead you ask for dry clothes. Historians still argue whether medieval knights were as chivalrous as literature painted them, or if chivalry was more aspirational than practiced. Judging by the mud you just tracked into the parlor, let's just say, you're still aspiring. Monk Yu, meanwhile, is working on copying a scroll. It's delicate work. You dip your quill carefully, scraping excess ink on the edge of the pot. The lines must be precise, the letters uniform. A single smudge could ruin hours of effort. You sigh deeply, not because you're frustrated, but because it's meditative, and you're fully absorbed. It's oddly satisfying, watching words bloom beneath your hand. At one point, a cat, not the same one from the stables, but just as smug, leaps onto your table and walks directly across the manuscript. You freeze. She stares at you. You stare back. She wins, obviously. Stray ink blots remain as evidence. You'll claim its decorative flair. That evening, both versions of you wind down in your own way. Monk you sings Compline under your breath while sweeping the scriptorium. Knight you sharpens your blade beside the hearth, its soft metallic rasp a lullaby of its own. But there's more on your mind than usual. Rumors swirl. Raiders, rebellion, maybe even war. You don't know what's true, what's bluster. The countryside always seems on the brink of something. Monk you praise for clarity. Knight you watches the fire, calculating routes and vulnerabilities. Here's a lesser-known tidbit. Some monasteries employed lay knights as protectors, warriors, who lived nearby, sworn to defend the monks but not bound by the cloistered vows. These two lives weren't as separate as they seemed. Sometimes, a knight would retire into monastic life. Other times, a monk would bless a sword before battle, hands trembling over cold steel. The lines blurred, and they're starting to blur, for you too. As you fall asleep, either to the gentle snores of your fellow monks or the distant howl of a restless wolf, you wonder what tomorrow will bring. Will it be another scroll? Another sparring match? A wound to dress? Or a battle to fight? Whatever comes, you'll meet it. In robes or in armor, you'll meet it. The sun creeps in slowly today, like it's uncertain whether it should even bother. You wake to a stiff back and a stiffer blanket. Monk. You groan softly, shifting on the thin straw mattress that smells faintly of old beeswax and distant mildew. You sit up, blink at the muted light filtering through the slit of a window, and stretch until your shoulders pop. Possibly a small sin, but also completely necessary. The chapel bells ring. Again. Time for lauds. You shuffle into your habit, the fabric stiff in the cold morning air, and you make your way to prayer with a rhythm that's more muscle memory than spiritual zeal. Not that you don't care. You do. But even the devout get sleepy. The candlelight flickers across stone walls, casting long shadows that make everything feel older than it already is. You chant in Latin, half of your mind floating toward the warm porridge waiting afterward. Meanwhile, Night You wakes up in a guest chamber that smells aggressively like dried rosemary and expensive wood polish. It's too early for the servants to have brought hot water, so you rinse your face in a basin of cold that jolts you awake like a slap from a sarcastic ghost. There's already a message waiting. Orders. Always more orders. The village up north needs extra protection. Wolves, bandits, or bored nobles playing power games again. But first, breakfast. If you were hoping for some sort of meat feast, think again. You get a stale heel of bread, a smear of hard cheese, and what might be ale or might be regrets. Historians still argue whether the daily food of lower-ranked knights was much better than that of commoners. Some records suggest noblemen ate lavishly while their garrison went hungry. Others claim knights got decent rations, especially before long rides. What's clear? You're chewing this bread for at least 6 minutes before it even considers being edible. Monk Yu, across the land, is busy preparing pigments for manuscript work. Crushed lapis lazuli, surprisingly expensive. Ochre from the earth near the stream. A bit of charcoal. The colors swirl, rich and alive. You're copying a book of Psalms today, and it's going well, until your elbow nudges the ink pot. There's a moment of pure horror. Then, ink. Everywhere. On the parchment, on your sleeve, and somehow in your mouth. A brother gasps softly. You spend the next hour carefully blotting and pretending it adds character. You're not the first monk to do this. In fact, there are real medieval manuscripts with doodles in the margins. Bored monks drew snails fighting knights, rabbits jousting, even monks mooning each other. Fringe tidbit? Absolutely. Sacred texts meet medieval memes. Knight U, in the meantime, is prepping for departure. Armor on, buckle here, strap there. Don't forget the padded gambeson underneath. It's like wrapping yourself in a quilt and then throwing metal weights on top. Glamorous? No. Necessary? Absolutely. You mount your horse and begin the ride north. When you arrive, it's less a bustling hamlet and more a huddled collection of homes with roofs like crooked smiles. The local reeve greets you nervously. There were sightings, he says. Strange men in the woods, livestock missing, fires in the hills. You listen, nodding. This could be something, or it could just be paranoia stirred by too many meads and not enough moonlight. Still, you post watch. Monk you, after recovering from ink disaster, now assists in the kitchen. It's lentils again. Always lentils. You chop leeks with a knife that hasn't seen a whetstone since the last king's coronation. The pot bubbles. Someone is singing. You join in, off-key but content. Your hands are steady now. No ink, no mistakes. Just quiet work, and the comforting scent of food being prepared for dozens of mouths. Each bowl a tiny offering. Night you shares your meal with the villagers that evening. Stew that tastes like boiled roots and guilt, but you eat it anyway. You tell stories, edited of course. You leave out the bloodier bits, and instead describe tournaments and brave horses, and a time your squire accidentally set a tent on fire. They laugh. It's the kind of laughter that warms a whole room, even one chilled by fear. You patrol later, torch in hand, boots sinking into the muddy earth. The woods whisper nearby, every rustle and hoot magnified. You don't see anything, but something sees you, monk. You walks the cloister garden under the moonlight thinking. You remember a passage you copied earlier. Something about steadfastness, about light in dark places. It felt relevant. You wonder about those outside the walls, people like your brother perhaps, who once took up the sword and never returned. Not everyone is meant for this life, but someone must preserve it. Here's a crossover moment for you. During times of regional conflict, monasteries often became safe havens. Monks offered shelter, food, and even medical care to wounded soldiers. Some chroniclers suggest certain monks became quite adept at battlefield triage, without ever stepping onto the battlefield itself. So the line between your two selves thins again. As the night deepens, Night U finishes patrol. Nothing happened. No bandits, no wolves. Just tension and silence. You return to your bedroll near the hearth, pulling the cloak tighter. You're tired, but you feel useful. Monk. You finish his final prayers and slips into bed, the sheets rough but familiar. You pull the blanket up to your chin and close your eyes, whispering a final word to the quiet room. You both fall asleep in different worlds, under the same stars. You wake to the sound of hooves. Night. You blinks hard, rubbing the sleep from your eyes as someone bursts into the stable room. It's your squire, flustered and breathing like he just outran the devil himself. Something's happened. he says. One of the shepherds is missing. Lovely. Just what you wanted after a peaceful night of paranoid torch-waving. You grab your sword, more instinct than preparation now, and swing your legs over the edge of the bed. Outside, the sun's barely begun to climb, but the whole village is already up, eyes wide, voices hushed. You lead a small group into the woods, the air still damp, carrying the scent of moss and broken branches. It's slow going. Birds call, overhead, and every shadow looks slightly guilty. You find a torn satchel first, then a trail of scattered wool. No blood, no body, just enough clues to make everything more unsettling. Could be wolves, someone mutters. Could be worse, you mutter back. Historians still argue whether missing peasants were often written off, or if full-blown searches like yours happened. More than we think. In some lordly accounts, there's evidence of structured search parties. In others, not a word. It's possible your thoroughness is rare, or you're just really bored and heroic. Meanwhile, Monk starts the day not with mystery, but with laundry. Washing robes is a thankless task, especially in early spring when your hands freeze in the river before the soap even foams. You rub fabric against smooth stones, watching suds swirl away like tiny ships. Another monk sings softly nearby. You hum along without realizing it. It's a mundane moment, but oddly soothing. Then it's back to your usual duties. Today, tending to the sick. The abbey has a small infirmary. And you? You've become quite good with herbal poultices. Crushed yarrow, warmed honey, a few questionable powders that probably aren't legal anymore but were all the rage in the 12th century. You press the mixture into a linen wrap, place it gently on a brother's ankle. He groans dramatically. You raise an eyebrow. It's not supposed to taste good, you say, even though it's on his leg. Back in the forest, night you finds the shepherd, alive, thank the saints. He's tangled in a bush, one leg caught in a trap meant for something else. You pry it open carefully, trying not to wince with him, and carry him back to the village. People cheer quietly. You nod like it's no big deal, though your back is absolutely going to complain about this later. Quirky tidbit time. Medieval trap design was weirdly advanced. Some had intricate spring mechanisms. Others used bait that smelled like fermented fish and despair. There's even one from the Baltic regions that, no joke, played a small wooden flute when triggered. If the sheep hadn't gotten stuck, maybe, you'd have heard music in the woods instead. At the monastery, you're preparing a sermon draft. Not to preach, no. Monks like you usually just copy things. But sometimes you help the abbot shape his message. Today's topic? Greed and humility. You try not to take it personally. As you ink the words, you catch yourself reflecting. Did you want more out of life once? A family maybe? Or a sword? But then someone brings in a child. A girl from the nearby village. High fever and flushed cheeks. Her mother pleads with the brothers. You move fast. Cool cloths, herbal teas, whispered prayers. You stay by her side, reading psalms aloud. Your voice stumbles on the Latin occasionally. She smiles anyway. Night U's day doesn't slow down, either. A messenger arrives at sunset, soaked and frantic. A noble is requesting your presence. Now. He's holding a feast, and there are concerns. You resist the urge to groan audibly and wipe the grime off your face with a damp cloth that smells like moldy lemons. Great. You ride out again, this time toward a large stone manor perched like a smug cat above the valley. When you arrive, Music spills from the hall, and warm light glows through stained glass. Inside, nobles drinking, jesters flipping, food steaming. You're ushered in like a last-minute decoration, armor still dusty. You learn that one of the Baron's rivals might be plotting something. The Baron wants extra eyes, subtle, intimidating, loyal eyes. That's you now, apparently. Historians still debate how often knights doubled as informal bodyguards at social events. Some suggest it was standard practice, especially when tensions brewed. Others think it was more theatrical, like having a sword at a birthday party, just in case. Meanwhile, Monk Yu is sleeping beside the child's cot. You wake every hour, to check her breathing, feel her forehead, whisper another prayer. The fever starts to break. She stirs and looks at you with eyes too big for her face. "You look like a goat," she says sleepily. You chuckle. "You sound like a squirrel," you reply. She smiles and drifts off again. Night. You stays near, the manor's outer wall, chatting quietly with other soldiers, keeping one hand on your hilt and one ear open. The feast carries on inside. Laughter, clinking goblets, a bard singing something wildly off-key. You let your eyes drift up to the stars. It's peaceful for now. Both of you, monk and knight, end the day with worn feet, full minds, and an odd ache in your chest. It's hard to explain. It's not sorrow. Not exactly joy either. Just the quiet weight of having lived through another page of history. You settle into bed, stone floor for one, straw mattress for the other, and whisper your last thoughts into the night. Not all heroes wear armor. Not all monks are still. Your day begins wrapped in the scent of burnt wood and damp night. You emerges from your modest chamber into a village buzzing with activity. The morning mist clings stubbornly to the fields like a lazy cat unwilling to move. The blacksmith's hammer clangs rhythmically in the distance, sparks flying, like captured stars. You trudge toward the forge, armor clanking with every step, reminding you why silence was always overrated. Today, you're inspecting your gear, because nothing says, "I'm ready for battle," like shiny dents and a few stubborn rust spots. Nearby, the smith grunts, slapping a red-hot horseshoe against the anvil. "You'll want these fitted before the hunt," he says, smirking. You nod, glad he didn't ask if your sword needed sharpening. That one's a sore subject. Historians still argue whether knights really polished their gear as obsessively as modern reenactors suggest, or if most were resigned to grimy practicality. You guess it depends on whether you owned the armor or rented it. Meanwhile, Monk Yu sits cross-legged in the scriptorium, quill poised over parchment, eyes narrowing. The scent of dried ink and beeswax candles fills the cramped room. Today's task is copying a text about the 7 deadly sins. Ironic, since you've wrestled with at least 3 before breakfast. You try to focus but keep glancing at a small lizard basking lazily on the windowsill. It flicks its tongue as if judging your handwriting. The monastic life is a mix of routine and tiny rebellions, like sneaking a glance at a forbidden illustration or humming a tune from the tavern. Speaking of which, monks were sometimes surprisingly shrewd negotiators for the abbey's meager income. You've overheard disputes about barley prices that could rival royal courts. Scholarly debate lingers on whether monasteries were purely spiritual retreats or cleverly disguised economic hubs. Back at the forge, you strap on your newly fitted horseshoes, feeling a little more like the knight you're supposed to be. The blacksmith tosses you a crooked dagger with a wink. "In case the sword gets bored," he says. You smirk. He's not wrong. Outside, children dart through muddy streets chasing chickens, their laughter ringing like a fragile melody. You pause to watch a boy trip spectacularly over his own feet and crash face first into a pile of hay. Classic, you mutter. He scrambles up, grinning, and winks at you like you're in on the joke. Meanwhile, Monk Yu prepares for the midday meal. The Abbey kitchen is a symphony of chopping, bubbling, and occasional curses when someone drops a ladle. Food is simple but hearty. Thick pottage, coarse bread, and sometimes, if fortune smiles, a hunk of cheese that doesn't taste like aged leather. You sit quietly, savoring the warmth spreading through your chest. Meals here are communal affairs, a rare pause in the otherwise strict daily schedule. You remember reading somewhere that monks sometimes brewed beer stronger than the local taverns, partly to sustain themselves during fasting days. It seems the divine doesn't frown on a little liquid courage now and then. Historians still argue about the exact recipes and whether monks invented the first happy hour. The afternoon brings training. Night you spars with your squire, the clang of steel echoing against stone walls. You teach him the basics: stance, grip, the ever-important, don't look like you're trying to swat a fly. He laughs when you miss a block, and you don't bother pretending to be offended. It's good to have someone younger to mock. Monk. You spend the same hours in silent contemplation, walking the cloister gardens. The scent of lavender and rosemary mingles with the faint odor of manure. You close your eyes, focusing on your breath, trying to ignore the fact that the neighbor's dog won't stop barking. Meditation is harder when you're wondering if anyone remembered to feed the chickens. Later, both you find yourself near the village well. Night you inspects the rope, making mental notes about its wear. Water is life here, but also a potential enemy. Contaminated wells could spread illness faster than any invading army. Quirky tidbit: some medieval wells had elaborate pulley systems operated by groups of women, who turned fetching water into a communal event, complete with gossip and laughter. Monks often guarded wells, believing the water sacred and fiercely protecting it from evil spirits. Monk Yu watches from a distance, quietly grateful for the fresh air and simple task. You help lower buckets and lift them back up, muscles aching, in a way that reminds you you're alive. Historians still debate how much water quality affected medieval health versus other factors like diet and hygiene practices. As evening falls, Night Yu prepares for a hunt. The forest is alive with rustling, leaves and distant calls. You track deer footprints, the ground soft beneath your boots. The thrill of the chase fills your senses, but there's a quiet respect too. You're not just taking life, you're part of a fragile cycle. You recall tales of knights who hunted for sport alone, often frowned upon by clergy. The debate continues on whether hunting was a noble skill or just aristocratic cruelty. Monk Yu, back at the abbey, lights a candle and opens a book on herbal medicine. You study the drawings of strange plants, some deadly, some healing, and wonder how many secrets are lost in the folds of time. It's comforting to think that even in the midst of chaos, knowledge is preserved here in ink and vellum. You trace a leaf with your finger, imagining the hand that first pressed it into the pages centuries ago. Both your days end with a shared glance toward the night sky. Stars twinkle cold and distant, reminding you that despite all your differences, you're threads in the same vast tapestry. Tomorrow will bring new tasks, new challenges, But for now, you breathe deeply, ready to drift into sleep. The dawn arrives with a chill that seeps through stone and cloth alike, waking you gently, or as gently as medieval mornings allow. Night you rise from a straw mattress that feels more like a pile of sticks dressed up in a sheet. The morning air smells of wood smoke and a hint of something sour, probably the remains of last night's ale mixed with unwashed wool. You tie your leather boots, stiff and reluctant, and prepare for a day of armor maintenance and patrol. The village wakes in waves. Roosters crow, carts rattle over cobblestones, and the occasional stray dog barks at the inevitable clumsiness of villagers setting out. You notice the difference between your world and monk use already. Your tasks are loud, physical, and carry the unspoken promise of danger. Today, you're escorting a supply wagon through the forest, vital goods that mustn't fall into the wrong hands. Meanwhile, Monkyu begins the day in near silence, the abbey cloister echoing only faint footsteps and the rustling of pages. Your morning prayer is a quiet ritual, filled with whispered words and the soft flicker of candlelight. You trace ancient symbols on worn parchment, mindful of your vow of obedience and the knowledge that these scribbles carry the weight of centuries. Quirky as it sounds, monks sometimes used special invisible inks made from exotic plants to keep texts safe from prying eyes, a medieval version of secret messaging. You step outside to tend the herb garden, where sage and thyme grow tangled with weeds. The scents are calming, almost medicinal, and remind you that healing is as much a part of your role as prayer. Historians still argue whether monks or knights contributed more to medical knowledge during these times, but both had their roles in keeping the village alive. Back in the village square, Night-Yu joins the escort party. Your horse snorts, shifting impatiently. The armor feels heavier in the morning cold, each metal plate a reminder that comfort was not a priority. You keep a sharp eye on the path. Bandits and wild animals are a constant threat. You overhear talk of a mysterious stranger seen near the border, a rumor that spreads faster than you can sharpen your sword. Your journey winds through dense forest, the canopy filtering sunlight into patchy gold. The woods are alive with strange sounds, birds calling, twigs snapping, and the occasional unsettling rustle. You swear you catch a glimpse of movement, perhaps just a deer or something less welcome. The idea of lurking enemies adds a quiet tension to your steps. Monkyu spends the day copying manuscripts in the scriptorium, the scratch of quill on parchment filling the air like a soft percussion. Occasionally, you pause to adjust your spectacles, those rare medieval lenses that some argue were more ornamental than practical. The debate rages among scholars about when and how vision aids were truly invented, and whether monks were the first to perfect them. Your task today is a religious text, adorned with colorful illuminations. The art is intricate, tiny figures, painted with painstaking care. Some suggest these illustrations doubled as secret codes, teaching hidden lessons to only the most devoted readers. You find yourself wondering how many secrets are tucked between the lines. The afternoon brings a break for prayer and reflection. Monk. You strolls through the cloister garden, the peaceful arches framing your path. You breathe in the fragrant blooms, the quiet a balm for your weary mind. Nearby, a small fountain trickles water into a stone basin, its gentle murmur a constant companion. Sometimes you imagine monks of old meditating here, perhaps struggling with the same doubts and hopes you carry. In the village, Night-Yu returns with the supply wagon, The horse is tired but safe. The relief is tangible. You shake hands with the merchant, exchanging terse nods and promises of future protection. Life in these parts is often a delicate balance between trust and suspicion. Evening falls with a chill that invites you to the hearth. You sit by the fire, the glow casting flickering shadows on the walls. You sip a mug of watered ale. Medieval hydration was a bit less glamorous than today's fancy sports drinks, but it did the job. A strange fact floats through your mind. Some knights supposedly carried small flasks of vinegar to freshen their breath after the less pleasant parts of daily life. It's a reminder that even the toughest had their quirks. Monk lights candles for evening prayers, the flame's soft glow casting long shadows. The quiet fills your soul with a strange comfort, the rhythm of rituals anchoring you amidst uncertainty. You think about the manuscripts you copied today, the knowledge preserved and passed on in an unbroken chain. Both your worlds close with the setting sun. Night. You removes armor with a tired sigh, muscles aching but spirits intact. Monk. You folds hands in silent gratitude, eyes heavy with sleep. Outside, the village settles into nighttime hush, the distant howl of a wolf breaking the stillness. The day's struggles, small victories, and quiet moments weave together in the tapestry of medieval life, a story you live again tomorrow. The chill of dawn creeps under your door, nudging you awake once again. You, the knight, pull on your gambeson beneath your chainmail, feeling the familiar weight settle over your shoulders like an old, grumpy friend. It's a day for jousting practice, a spectacle of clangs, thuds, and the occasional grunt, where you and your fellow knights show off your prowess for the local lord. The clatter of hooves and the smell of leather and sweat fill the air. You probably won't survive this without a bruise or two, but hey, who's counting? Meanwhile, Monk is already in the chapel, fingers stiff from the early cold chanting. The office. The rhythm of your voice blends with the flicker of candle flames, creating a sacred hum that echoes off stone walls. You carefully prepare ink made from oak galls. Yes, oak galls. Those weird, round plant tumors, which produce the deep black ink essential for manuscript work. Historians still argue whether the monk's ink recipes evolved from secret alchemy, or simple trial and error. The jousting lists are set up in the courtyard, straw bales lining the edges to catch errant horses or flying knights. You feel your heart race, the tension thick enough to slice with a sword. You mount your steed, a magnificent destrier, steady and sure. As you lower your lance, you can't help but think how medieval sports were less about safety and more about proving you're the toughest person around. The crowd roars, mostly villagers betting on the outcome, or just here for the entertainment. On the other side of the abbey walls, Monk prepares parchment for a new project, a bestiary, a book of animals both real and imagined. You dip your quill carefully, ready to sketch dragons and unicorns alongside real creatures like lions and owls. Fun fact, monks sometimes added fanciful beasts to these books, blending myth and reality so seamlessly that readers couldn't always tell which was which. It's an artistic choice that leaves historians debating how much medieval people believed in these creatures. Back at the tournament, a rival knight charges, lance aimed true. The impact sends a jolt through your arm, but you stay mounted, spurring your horse forward for another pass. You catch a glimpse of your opponent's grin beneath his helmet, a mixture of respect and mischief. Jousting is as much about honor as it is about winning, though the occasional fall reminds you that death is always a lurking companion. Monk. You spends the afternoon illuminating pages with vibrant colors extracted from crushed minerals and plants. You mix lapis lazuli for blue, a precious pigment worth its weight in gold, sometimes literally. This rare blue was so prized that some monasteries kept strict control over its use. The sparkle of these pigments under candlelight turns your work into something almost magical, a quiet rebellion against the dull gray of daily toil. After practice, Knight Yu heads to the smithy to repair a dented helmet. The blacksmith's hammer rings out in steady beats, shaping metal with fierce precision. You chat with him about the latest rumors of unrest beyond the village, foreign mercenaries gathering, shifting allegiances, and the ever-present threat of war. Your job isn't just about shining armor, it's about survival in a world where peace is fragile. Monk. You joins the other brothers for the evening meal, thin stew and coarse bread. The quiet chatter centers on the news brought by a traveling merchant. Strange comets spotted in the sky, an omen some interpret as the coming of great change. The monks debate quietly whether celestial events truly influence earthly affairs, or if it's all superstition. Your mind wanders back to the illuminated stars you drew earlier, wondering what secrets they might hold. Night descends softly, and the sounds of the abbey fade into whispers. You lay your head on a simple wooden pillow, the roughness oddly comforting. Outside, the village settles beneath a blanket of stars, each one a tiny flicker in the vast medieval night. You close your eyes, the clang of jousting armor replaced by the quiet heartbeat of the cloister, both worlds spinning onward into the unknown. The morning sun spills weakly through narrow windows, casting long shadows across your chamber. Night you awaken to the familiar smell of damp earth and burning peat, the village slowly stirring. Today's task is less glamorous. A long day of escorting merchants along bumpy roads and narrow passes, guarding goods from highwaymen and worse. You tighten the straps on your breastplate and sling your sword belt tighter. The clatter of hooves and rattling of carts soon fill the street, accompanied by the grumbles of both horses and merchants. Traveling is never comfortable, and you won't be surprised if the road leaves you covered in more dust than glory. Monk you, meanwhile, rises for the Matins prayer, your breath visible in the chilly stone chapel. The chants flow softly as you move through familiar rituals, the ancient Latin words grounding you in a world much quieter than the one outside. You prepare ink for copying a new codex, a text rumored to contain wisdom from distant lands, perhaps brought back by crusaders or wandering scholars. Scholars still debate the exact origins of some manuscripts, whether they were gifts. The road is rough, lined with gnarled trees and muddy patches that threaten to tip wagons over. The merchants grumble, some clutching their wares like lifelines. You keep a wary eye on the forest edges, aware that not all travelers you meet are friendly. Banditry is an ever-present risk, and rumors whisper of a gang using caves nearby as hideouts. Quirky fact, some bandits used to paint fake eyes on their backs to scare travelers, a tactic historians still debate the effectiveness of. Monk Yu spends hours bent over your desk, illuminating letters with gold leaf that glints faintly in the candlelight. The shimmer feels almost like a secret handshake between you and the past, a small rebellion against the darkness that often shrouds medieval life. Your fellow brothers admire your steady hand, though some joke that monks have the most delicate fingers in the land. Less suited for sword fights, more for manuscript fights. The caravan's progress is slow but steady. Along the way, you stop at a roadside tavern. The smell of roasting meat and stale ale hitting you like a wall. The tavern keeper eyes you carefully, no doubt sizing up your coin purse and your armor. Inside, you hear tales of strange happenings, a haunted mill, a missing child, a mysterious traveler in a black cloak. The local legends keep the village buzzing after dark, adding a dash of intrigue to the mundane. Monk. You takes a rare break to walk in the cloister garden, fingers trailing. Along fragrant herbs, the scent of rosemary and lavender brings a brief peace, a reminder that even in hard times, beauty finds a way. You pause to watch a small bee flit between blossoms, its tiny wings a marvel of nature. Oddly enough, medieval monks were among the earliest European beekeepers, believing honey to be both food and medicine. Your day ends at a crossroads, the road stretching out into unknown dangers and unseen friends. You unsaddle your horse and rest beneath a canopy of stars, the distant hoot of an owl your only companion. You think about the village you protect and the fragile peace you fight to maintain. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but for now, you savor this brief stillness. Back in the abbey, Monk prepares for night prayers, the soft murmur of psalms filling the silence. The world outside fades away as your thoughts drift between duty and dreams, both anchored in the endless passage of time. The village wakes to the faint toll of bells, their echoes weaving through the morning fog. Night you tighten the straps, on your leather boots, the familiar creak greeting your ears. Today, you accompany the Lord Steward on a trip to inspect nearby farmlands. A practical day, but essential. The Lord's wealth depends on these fields, and your role is as much about diplomacy as defense. The sun warms your back as you stride alongside, the scent of tilled earth rich and earthy, mixed with the faint sweetness of wildflowers. You probably won't survive this day without tripping over some root or getting a face full of dust, but such is the life of a knight. Meanwhile, Monk begins the day in the scriptorium, working on a homily to read during Sunday Mass. You carefully select phrases that will inspire, comfort, and maybe even rouse a few sleepy parishioners from their spiritual slumber. Quirky bit. Some monks believe that adding tiny drawings of rabbits or mythical beasts in the margins helped ward off evil spirits from the manuscript. Historians still argue whether these illustrations were purely decorative or had deeper protective purposes. The steward talks endlessly about crop yields, taxes, and the fickle weather. You trudge through muddy paths and narrow furrows, your boots sucking into the damp soil. You notice the farmers' faces, hardened from sun and toil but proud of their work. It's a reminder that your armor protects not just yourself, but the lives that depend on the harvest. Sometimes you wonder if your horse understands just how important these fields are, or if it simply enjoys munching on the grass at every opportunity. Monk pauses to admire a newly arrived manuscript, a copy of the Psalter from a distant abbey. The ornate lettering and gold leaf shimmer are mesmerizing. You trace the fine lines of an illustrated peacock, a symbol of immortality and resurrection. The scribes who crafted these pages often spent months on a single volume, a labor of devotion and artistry. The debate among scholars today revolves around how monks balance this intense artistic work with the daily rigors of monastic life. At the fields, the steward's complaints grow louder as he notices some damage caused by wild boars. You swear under your breath, thinking of the coming hunt. Wild boar hunts were a favorite pastime for knights, combining skill, bravery, and often a good deal of mud and chaos. Some stories suggest knights would sometimes fight boars nearly as dangerous as human enemies. Maybe it's the medieval version of extreme sports. In the scriptorium, you experiment with pigments for the manuscript's decorations, mixing crushed insects to produce a vibrant red, called kermes. The process is oddly satisfying, even if the idea of squished bugs in your paint makes you twitch a little. You muse on how these colors, painstakingly made from natural materials, have survived centuries, preserving not only texts but the soul of the medieval world. As the day wanes, Knight Yu returns to the castle, boots muddy, and armor slightly dented from a misstep in the field. The steward's reports will no doubt lead to more work, and perhaps a few more taxes. Still, you feel the quiet pride of service, knowing that your presence keeps things running, fragile as that peace may be. Monk. You closes the scriptorium shutters, the fading light making the room feel warmer despite the chill. You prepare for evening prayers, the rhythm of chanting calming your restless mind. The weight of the day lifts as you fold yourself into the quiet traditions, the flickering candles offering a gentle glow that pushes back the darkness. Outside, stars wink through a clear sky, and the village settles into its nighttime rhythm, both knight and monk poised to face whatever tomorrow brings. The dawn breaks slowly, casting a pale glow over the village rooftops. Knight Yu awake to the muffled sounds of roosters crowing and the distant clatter of wooden wheels. Today is market day, a chance to mingle with common folk and nobles alike, watch bartering unfold, and maybe even enjoy a moment of levity, if the day permits. The fresh smell of bread baking drifts from the nearby bakery, mixing with the faint aroma of smoke from hearth fires. You strap on your armor with practiced ease, ready for whatever chaos this bustling day might bring. You probably won't survive the endless haggling without a headache. But hey, at least it's a break from the muddy fields and endless patrols. Monk Yu begins with morning prayers in the Abbey Chapel, the soft echo of chants mingling with the stirring world outside. The market brings excitement even to the cloister's quiet, as travelers and traders pass through the village. You find yourself daydreaming about the strange spices and fabrics that arrive from faraway lands, luxuries that feel almost mythical in your daily routine. Some monks even kept herb gardens to experiment with exotic plants, hoping to unlock their medicinal secrets. Historians still argue whether such gardens were practical experiments or symbolic acts of faith. At the marketplace, knights and merchants jostle alongside farmers and artisans. You watch as a vendor hawks furs, vibrant cloth, and odd trinkets. One seller boasts of a dragon's tooth necklace, while another offers a mysterious tonic promising vitality, though most buyers exchange skeptical glances. You overhear gossip about the Lord's impending tournament, a chance for knights to display skill and earn favor. Quirky tidbit: some tournaments included events like mock naval battles on flooded fields, a spectacle both dangerous and bizarre. Monk. You takes a rare stroll through the market after chores, fingers brushing over fresh produce and vibrant textiles. You stop to admire the intricate weaving of a tapestry depicting a biblical scene, marveling at the skill involved. The monastery's art often inspired such works, and sometimes monks contributed designs or prayers woven into the fabric. The debate remains on how much these artworks influence the broader culture beyond sacred walls. Night. You find yourself drawn into an impromptu storytelling circle around a fire pit, sharing tales of battles won and foes bested. The stories grow taller with each telling, but the laughter feels genuine. Someone jokes about how a knight once fell off his horse simply because he forgot which side to mount from. You chuckle, remembering your own less than graceful moments. Despite the hard days, these shared moments bring a sense of belonging, a reminder that even warriors need friends and stories. Monk. You returns to the abbey as the market winds down, the setting sun casting long shadows on the cloister walls. You prepare for vespers, the closing prayers that ease the soul toward rest. The quiet brings reflection on the day's small joys, the duties fulfilled, and the endless journey of faith. As the candles gutter, you feel a deep connection to all who lived before you and all who will come after. Outside, the village settles into twilight's embrace, stars beginning their silent vigil. Knight and monk, worlds apart yet intertwined, each finds solace in the familiar rhythms of medieval life, the endless dance of duty, faith, and fleeting moments of peace. The day fades gently now, and you, dear listener, drift with the same steady calm that marked the lives of knights and monks. The clatter of armor and the whisper of parchment, the scent of earth and candle wax, all these fade softly, like a lullaby carried on the wind. There is no rush here, only the steady pulse of history unfolding in quiet moments. Close your eyes and feel the weight of the world soften. Imagine the gentle rustle of leaves outside a stone chapel, or the distant murmur of a village settling in for the night. Let your breath slow, your mind drift, and your heart find peace in this slow, enduring story. Tomorrow is another day for knights to ride and monks to pray, but for now, rest deeply. You have walked through the echoes of a long ago time, and now it is time to sleep. Good night, and sweet dreams.